Okay, today I'm delighted to be joined by Scott Butler, Executive Director at Material Focus, which is a not for profit dedicated to building a world where materials are never wasted. So, right up our street. But thank you for joining us on the podcast today, Scott.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Now, just to give our listeners context, we like to start at the beginning with our guests to introduce themselves. So, where did your and when did your career in sustainability begin?
Oh, good question. Way back when. So I was always interested in geography was my favorite subject when I was at school. So as an A level, I did, I think what was probably relatively new at the time, I did geography and environmental science and economics as my A levels, and that sort of shows where my interest was. I, like good people should, I wobbled about for a little while and then did a geography degree, but then sort of came down to London, hung out, was doing stuff, and then thought, actually, where does my career lie? I felt it had a future in environment. So I did a master's degree at Imperial College. I did the environmental technology master's there. Worked for the Science Museum for a little while. I was a curator at the Science Museum, which was quite cool, although it was very frustrating in holiday periods because my office was on the roof of the Science Museum. And despite all the wonderful exhibits in the Science Museum, kids like to play with lifts. So if you went out for lunch, it took you about an hour to get back to your office because they were going up and down in the lifts, despite looking at the wonderful stuff there. And moved out of that into working for Samsung, whilst the waste electrical and restriction of hazardous substances directives were coming in, and then moved into the world of producer responsibility from there and set up a compliance scheme in the UK, ELP, one of the largest schemes in the UK. And then most recently, I've been looking after Material Focus, which is a dream job, which is basically trying to figure out how we can tackle all of these challenges and all these opportunities around electrical waste and batteries.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's start with the fundamentals. Why should we recycle waste, electrical and electronic equipment, or we, as it's known in the trade?
Yeah, it's full of some of the most precious materials on the planet. The stuff that makes smart and green tech work, the stuff that makes all of our technology work. And don't get me wrong, we're pro tech, we're pro electricals. It gives wonderful stuff. It keeps our food safe, it keeps our houses warm, it connects us, it allows us to do all these wonderful things. But inside of these often clean, sleek, boxes are some of the most precious materials on the planet. And a lot of effort goes into getting those out of the ground. And a lot of impact is associated with that, not just environmental impact, but also social impact around mining. And to throw that away dismissively, or accidentally, because a lot of the small tech particularly is binnable, fits in the bin, we don't know what to do with it, people throw it away, is a waste. It's a shocking waste. And we're just trying to wake people up in as positive a way as possible to say, great, value your tech, but also value the materials that it's made of. And one of the things that's been creeping up recently over the last few years is that we've got lots of portable tech. Think about when you leave the house, what are you carrying with you? And it's not just your keys and wallet anymore. It's devices, it's a tablet, it's your phone, all those sort of things. It might be a little tracker or something like that. All of that is powered by lithium ion batteries. And that lithium ion battery, again, a wonderful piece of technology. If it goes to the wrong place, which is a bin or is littered, then it's at risk of being damaged. And if it's damaged, either crushed or it comes into contact with air or water, then it causes big fires. So that's another thing that we've sort of woken up to and are trying to wake the nation up to, is that it's not just an environmental waste, it's a public safety fire risk challenge as well.
Yes, and waste companies hate disposable vapes in particular.
Oh yeah, yeah. Vapes is you've done it to me early today. I try and go every day. I try and go a single day where I don't have to talk about vapes, but regretfully, that's something we landed upon. A student came in to see us, was looking at the vaping industry, was doing a sort of piece looking at how the vaping industry was it similar to big tobacco? So it was more a sort of socio-economic piece, and they'd fallen upon the environmental thing. That was about 4 years ago, and then we started to look at it, and it's just phenomenal. It's just the I'm on the record of calling them the most environmentally wasteful, damaging, and dangerous consumer good ever sold. And I put that out as a bit of a challenge for someone to sort of say, don't be stupid. I actually stood in front of the industry 3 or 4 times, the vaping industry, and told that to them, and they all nodded in agreement, yet continued to sell them. So yeah, that at the moment, last time we did the research, it's like 8 million a week are being binned or littered. It's beyond belief, and we've seen the disposable vape ban come in. Is it having an effect? I think we were right. Regretfully, it hasn't. The new models look exactly the same. They taste the same. They're packaged the same. They're priced the same. And even if we can half that 8 million, which in itself is a bold sort of achievement, we're still left with 4 million being binned or littered. So what's success when it comes to that? And that the the vape is a sort of, for us, a bit of a gateway drug, forgiving the pun, for all electricals. Anything with a plug, battery, and cable is full of the valuable materials that are inside a vape. And a vape is actually a wonderful piece of technology. And from a marketing perspective, is a phenomenal. It's look, it's feel, everything that's put together should, notwithstanding the obvious, is iconic. But we need to learn the lesson from those types of products that hit the market. It's like people imagine that there's like an Illuminati, a sort of committee of people who say that yes, that product is allowed to hit the market. And what we can see with Shein and Temu and online marketplaces, that never existed. So anything can hit the market. So we're spending a lot of time now. We've done some work on what we call fast tech, and vapes are the poster child of fast tech. Is like, we've got to get ahead of this stuff. We've got to be looking what's going on. And my social algorithms are a mess because I have to look at this stuff. I get ads for the most random stuff in the world, and you won't believe, light up toilet seats as an example. It's just popping out of everywhere now, and it's a worry, but it's also an opportunity for us to unite together and go, actually, we don't want this sort of world. We don't want this sort of technology. We want good technology. We want to make it last. We want to use it. We want to pass it on. We want to keep it going for as long as it can. And when it's not, we want to recycle it. But we don't want this disposable tat that we're being sort of inundated with at the moment.
Yeah. But I suppose in a way, banning the vapes is an easy one, but tat, as you put it, is a little bit more difficult. And with 3 kids myself, I know the pressure to purchase things that will flash lights at you for a short period of time before probably going to the back of the drawer or in the bin. But from a policy point of view, how feasible is it to try and avoid sort of a linear economy of these fast tech electronics, as you put it?
Yeah, it is just really difficult. We have a phrase within the team, which we call, came from my daughter, actually. One of my daughters, when she was young, is like, she asked a question about, so I can't remember the question, what we were related to, but she went, what, in true life? And we go back to that, in true life. What are people thinking, feeling? Busy lives, noisy world, everybody selling stuff to them. I think banning things is a bit like it's a bit like being a wasp. Wasps run around and sting everything, where we want to be more like bees, and we want our stings to have purpose or meaning, and we want to be over, busy making honey rather than just making noise, sort of thing. And that's probably unfair to wasps. So if there's a wasp appreciation society, I'm not an expert in wasps, and I apologize for upsetting them. But we never said that the disposable vape should be banned, because not because we like them. I think our statements and my statements are pretty clear where we are on that. But it felt a bit of a blunt instrument. And I think, regretfully, we're seeing that now, where it's not really made much of a change yet. And if it does make a change, I still think it will be marginal. it's about consumers. It's about people, actually, not consumers. It's about people. It's about our behavior, and it's a long haul thing. It's about us being a bit more mindful about what we buy, being aware of the value of what we have, keeping it going for longer. As I said, never binning it at the end of life, passing it on to family, friends, donating it, selling it on online platforms. Never binning it is the most important thing, and it is the challenge of life. We can't sugarcoat that. It's not easy, and you can't just do it in one push. We have our Recycle Your Electricals campaign led by the mighty Hypnocat and all the things that he does. But there's a lot of work that goes behind that around what we're targeting, who we're targeting, when we target them, what channels we're on. It's not just bunging an ad on the television, which it feels like sometimes people think it is. Like, oh, you just got some money and you put an ad on the TV. It's like, no, 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 no. There's a lot of really clever people and analytics and data that goes behind everything that we do, and that's our cause now. That's our cause.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned it, so I suppose we should talk about it now. What the hell is Hypnocat? Perhaps you could explain it.
But it's an interesting origin. So we started about, I think it was just sort of, yeah, 2018, 2019. And we were lucky enough to receive some funding from the waste electrical regulations. Targets weren't being met, and there was a sort of funding pot. And the first thing that we did was not rush in and do something. It was like, okay, what do we need to do? Let's get some evidence. Where are people at? What do they think? What do they feel? What are they smelling? What are they tasting? Where are they at when it comes to electricals? And what do we need to do about that? And basically, it's behavior change. It's about accessibility and ease. So we needed to make it easier for people to do what we wanted them to do. And then we needed to motivate them to do it. And a big part of that has been funding. We funded over 60 projects that have made it easier for 10 million people to reuse and recycle their electricals. But then we also needed to make more people aware of why they should do that. And we deliberately went in to be positive. So this wasn't like we're all doomed. It was, come on, collectively, we've all got this stuff. We can do something about it. And we figured out how to get it through. And one of the things that we still have it, is this, like, it was this idea of hidden potential, lost potential. So sitting inside all of these electricals that are either in the drawer of doom, one of the things that unites us in a divided world is that we all have a drawer of doom. So we found that thing, which is cool. It's either in the drawer of doom or in the bin, is this lost value of material, this hidden potential. So we produced some work with creative agencies, which was almost like a rainbow sort of idea. If you imagine like a toast, we had like images of a toaster or a kettle and a smartphone with rays of different colored lights coming out of it to represent the different materials. So it's like, this is hidden potential. Nobody likes lost potential. It's like a Billy Elliot type sort of story. So let's encourage good stuff. And we put it out there and people loved it. The images were great, but they didn't get it. They were like, well, it's too much of a leap. So, we play to the masses. This is the thing as well. We're not, I'm sure there are lots of circular economy purists who go, oh, well, they do. They go, well, why are you going on about recycling? And, there's loads more R's above recycling that you should do. And we're talking to normal folk. We're talking to our weird cousins, and your best mate's brother. That's who we're talking to, not the theorists and the purists, because we need the masses to do. So we tested it, and the feedback was we like it, but we don't get it. And then through the conversations, remember the Daz adverts with Danny Baker and Shane Ritchie? It was annoying adverts but with a really clear message. And then that lent into messengers being really important. Having just a messenger, it doesn't almost matter who it is, but if you have a messenger that's vivid, and then people will lean in rather than lean away. They'll go, what's this? Even if they like it or don't like it, it's like they lean in and listen. So we had this, one of the ideas was this, at the time, this does sound very bizarre, but at the time there was this Scandinavian, like, Thor, Chris Hemsworth like guy doing the rounds promoting uh the joining the Navy. So he's, resplendent, long blonde hair, built very impressively, and he was out there marketing the importance of. So we create this idea called the junk hunk. So it was this like hunky guy doing, and the people would lean in and go, "Who's this guy?" And we then also around well, it's not around the time, but Grumpy Cat is very famous on the internet.
Yeah.
So it's like we just put those two things out as ideas. If we have the junk hunk or we have a cat, because people like cats and internet is full of people searching for cats, let's go with it. And that's basically the origins of Hypnocat. So it started off as just play around, test the market. The junk hunk was something I didn't think I could get past the organizing committee. Why have I got a half-naked Scandinavian naval officer in a bin? Would be too hard to sell. But the cat really landed, and then we then created this mythology around him. Why is he there? He's a hypnot. And then also we decided that we wouldn't over-explain him as well. So it was. So if you've seen, I'm sure you've seen the TV ad, but you know, having a mad psychedelic pink cat just head spin out to you,
Yeah.
just tell you that he is Hypnocat, and then start singing a techno sort of rap about recycling your electricals, whilst strange, makes people lean in. They
Yeah.
go, "What the hell? What is this? I don't know what this is." And that's basically the story. It's a lot of work that goes into something that looks a bit weird.
And presumably, because you've stuck with it, it works. Or how do you
Well,
measure whether it
exactly.
works? Yeah.
Yeah. So we trialed it. So we didn't go out and we're very sensible despite external appearances. We're very sensible. So we just trialed it and tested it, and it was landing, and it's landing, and it's still landing. So we every campaign push that we do, we track independently. We look at the numbers, we look where we can tweak it, but the actual core message is still really landing. And it's a funny one because we sort of, maybe as you might imagine, we're brimful of ideas. The trick that we have now is, whilst we're bored of it, the public aren't bored of it. So we
Yeah.
have, so we let the numbers dictate to us. Okay, is this still working? Is it still landing? And of course, we reserve the right, and we will tweak it at some point. But when you've got a messenger as strong as that, you don't give it up lightly.
Yeah. Yes. Well, there's no political saying that when you've repeated a slogan so much, you're getting sick of it. The public is perhaps just becoming aware of it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. But what's in the next stage? I have a drawer of doom, and I keep meaning to. And every so often, if I am going to the civic amenity site, I will take stuff. The local authority will now pick up small electricals if I book a collection. But there's one thing of having a Hypnocat telling you to recycle, but then it's not the same as putting your milk cartons in the recycling bin. It always seems a bit more complicated. So how do we jump that gap between sort of getting people aware and getting people to actually be able to recycle?
Yeah, that's one of the constraints that we have. There's things that we could talk about that we don't talk about because it's too difficult. So we don't want to put in front of people a proposition, do this, and then when they look, it's too hard. And maybe a bit of it is we've had to do that to try and force change. So we're working a lot with retailers for them to properly step up and do a bit more than they could do. They all talk about how if you look at their annual reports, there's all these commitments to supporting the community and the environment. Yet when it comes to recycling electricals and batteries, they tend to hide their responsibilities away. So we're trying to encourage more of that. As I said, part of what we do is not just talk about it, we actively engage and make it better. So we funded a number of projects that make it easier all across the UK. We provide a lot of insights and evidence to policymakers about where we're at, what we could do to make it better. We don't make policy recommendations per se, but we do present the evidence and the numbers that say if you do this, then this will happen. And it's that, as I sort of said earlier, it's that constant challenge about making it easier. We've got a number of public bring banks now. We've got bright pink electrical bring banks on the streets. They're not perfect. They come with challenges around graffiti, around contamination, and all those other things. But it's just keeping working, making it, and building it, and building it. And it flows through families and generations as well, where too many, when we started this, lots of people didn't realize that electricals could be recycled, should be recycled, why they should be recycled. We did it. I think it is a bit of a pub fact, but I should go back to the research. But I think around 20% of people didn't even think an electric toothbrush was electric. Thought of it as a toothbrush. You'd be amazed at the amount of people who vape who don't know that vape is an electrical item. They don't contemplate that it's powered by a battery. It's just it delivers them what it delivers them, and then it stops working, and then they move on from it. So it's just that constant work. But making it easier is a big part of it. We're doing some research now that's going to be released towards the end of the summer, looking at the role that curbside collections may or may not play in collecting more electricals. There's over 100 local authorities in the UK, out of a 300 plus, who do provide some curbside. Many of them don't promote it because it's difficult for them to actually service it, because if it's busy, then they've got a small area on the vehicle for it, and if it fills up, then they can't collect later on in the round. And that's really important as well. That negative experiences are really powerful. They're far more powerful than positive ones. If you get up today and go, you're going into town, and you get the bus or the train, and it arrives on time, and you get to where you want to get to at the right time, and the air conditioning's working, and you're not too hot, you don't tell anybody about that. If you go to the bus stop or the train station, the train's delayed and all these other things, you'll tell 3 or 4 people what of a broken Britain, what a mess this is. So that's another factor too, is just trying to be positive in a world that frankly doesn't always seem very positive as well, and almost being resilient in that positivity, and but making it easier is a big part of it too. It's not just telling people, but we're very mindful of that, but we also are conscious that sometimes that bit of tension, that grit, can make it better. So for example, with vapes, we're telling people who vape, go back to your shop. They're legally obligated to take back those vapes for recycling. So tell them to take them back. And if they say no, tell them you'll go somewhere else, because it's not that hard to buy a vape. They can be sold everywhere. So just go to somewhere that does, and just so there's a bit of campaigny bit in there as well sometimes. And you have to accept that you are pushing you're pushing a rock up a hill to a degree.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's assume they. And I've got a desk of doom, never mind a drawer of doom, and I'm just looking at a dead smartphone, because I do tend to run my electronics until they literally start falling over, or go well past falling over. But take a smartphone, typical piece of waste electronic equipment. If I push that into the recycling system, what happens to it, and how much value can be recovered from it?
So in the UK and in lots of other countries, there is a well-established producer responsibility system. So the people who make electricals, so anything from a fridge to a smartphone to a vape to a cable and plug, are required to finance the costs of recycling them. So, and that's been established for about 20 years in the UK. So basically, what they do is the producers join groups who then are responsible for making contracts with local authorities and retailers to collect the waste electricals. And they then also make contracts with logistics, transport people, and recyclers to recover the material. And they have to provide evidence of that to the environment agencies across the UK and to the Department for Environment. Most of that, the vast majority of that processing takes place in UK businesses, so supports the UK economy, UK jobs, and depending on the type of equipment, they go to slightly different places. So You recycle a fridge differently than you would recycle a smartphone, for example, because fridges are full of, bigger, chunkier, full of gases and all this other
I've
stuff.
seen a fridge recycling system in action, and it was medieval. Busy dropping them into a container full of whirling hammers.
Some are getting better now. There's some new ones that are much more sophisticated, and that's partly to do with that producer responsibility system, which is putting investment into recovering more materials. So so the smartphone will go into quite a mechanical process. It will take out the battery, the lithium ion battery, because they don't want that going into a plant where it could set fire. And that lithium ion battery will go to reprocessing in Belgium mainly at the moment. It's quite a heavy industrial process. So there's only a couple of plants in Europe that can handle that. There are new technologies looking at less environmentally impactful ways of recovering the materials from them. But the whole focus is on getting value out of that. So producers pay and still pay, but the way that they reduce their bill is by the recyclers getting the value of the material from what
Yeah.
they're doing. And that's the sort of, in a way, it's a perfect sort of incentive. Is that the incentive is always to be efficient, effective, recover more materials, and then some of it will go to energy from waste. We don't include that, but our national stats, the stats we use is around 75% of materials from small electricals can be recovered. The remainder mainly goes to energy from waste, but we don't think that that helps the public message because energy from waste has, issues associated with it. Discuss. It's not an area I'm an expert in. So yeah, it's all about material recovery. And then what we're seeing now is as you see these geopolitical shifts around critical minerals and the lithiums, the neodymiums or neodymium, as I like to call it, just because it's an easier thing. All these galliums and all this stuff is more focused on recovering those materials, which are not yet at an economic scale. But if you look at where those global shifts are happening, you're starting to see more sophistication come into the recovery process. So whilst it initially focused on the obvious ones like steel, aluminium, copper, palladium, that the sort of gold in circuit boards, still gold in circuit boards. You're now seeing this extension into actually there's some other thing coming. There's a train that's left the station somewhere in Shenzhen, that we need to be conscious of it arriving because these particularly when you look at smart and green tech, and that's another discussion we could have about how green is green tech, discuss. Those things are going to become more important.
Yeah. But I was thinking, we've long heard about urban mining, this idea that, we could almost dig up landfills and treat them as a raw material. And, there are companies who will take road sweepings and process them for platinum because the concentration of platinum in road sweepings is apparently higher than the concentration in the original ore because of catalytic converters from cars disintegrating. So I was just wondering, of all these, clever materials that go into a smartphone or a tablet or whatever, how feasible is it to get them back out, above and beyond the lithium that you mentioned?
Yeah, the truthful answer, shock. I don't know. I read those stories too, and I'm excited by them. I'm interested in them. I very rarely see them, and yeah, to anyone who's involved in that, this is not targeted at any individual idea. I just very rarely see them scale. It's like a really interesting if you're technology metal sort of tech nerd. It's like, oh wow, that's really interesting. And then you don't hear about it it's probably where I'm at. We've launched recently as Material Focus a circular electricals fund. So it's £1 million fund that's live now. Closing date is 14th of August for any watchers or listeners if you're interested in that and search our website for details. Sorry, that was a shameless plug.
No, that's all welcome.
But yeah, I think I think without being overly critical, it's early days on many of those things. It's startups that are looking for investment. And of course, what they do is try and tell their story as effectively as possible. And that's all about the opportunity. But there are real opportunities there. I guess that guy who's got his Bitcoin in some landfill in Newport will be really pleased if urban mining really kicks off. But yeah, in theory, it looks really attractive. It's just, I mean, this year has been crazy. If you think about 2025, the whole geopolitics around critical minerals, technology, metals has been off the scale, and I don't know. I mean, I follow it. I comment about it. I find it really interesting as a, as a geographer first, and as an environmentalist. It of course is well in my I'm a perfect audience for all of that stuff. It's exactly what I live and breathe for. But I'm hopeful that there can be some real progress. But if I'm truthful, it feels exploratory at the moment. And despite the fact that we know that technology is full of all of these rare earths, call them raw earths, as Trump famously called them once, not many of them are actually being recovered, it feels like, at any scale yet. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be talking. I mean, but that in itself means we should be talking about it. We should be focusing on it. We should be ahead of the curve because, like I said earlier about products like vapes and fast tech, we just need to be, we need to be smarter. We need to be ahead of the game rather than dealing with the messes that are being made when we're not looking at them.
Yeah. It's I was you mentioned rare earths and critical minerals and technology metals. I spent some time yesterday preparing for this, trying to find definitions of different ones. Right in saying it, technology metals and critical minerals. A lot of materials that we've been talking about fall into both categories, and rare earth metals are a subset that are definitely both critical minerals and technology metals. Is that correct?
Oh no, I'm not Susie Dent, so don't look at me for the definition, the technology. We use we've started to use technology metals more as a phrase because it's of all of the three phrases in play, it's
Mm.
probably the easier one to think about. And we can use that to say, look, it's all metals that are in technology. So we can put it up into copper and steel and aluminium.
Mm.
Yeah, that doesn't help. And also the fact that rare earths are not rare is another another thing that is really confusing. They're just rare in the sense that they're in low quantities relative to the amount of rock you have to smash up. But there's actually plenty of them. But the plenty of them seems to be mainly in China and
Yeah.
in Latin America. I actually, my wife is Brazilian, so I read yesterday a really interesting story about Brazil moving from still in Brazil they still mine asbestos, which I thought in itself was a
Yeah.
shocking thing. But that area is now moving into rare earths and is looking at that. And that's the interesting thing about, as I said before, that is how green is green tech, is that a lot of the technology that we need in the future is associated with quite old school mining. It's
Mm.
still that big mass land, water, labor challenges, and that's why the imperative or the desire to work on recovering already mined material from old and unwanted electricals is really important because whilst it might seem small, even every vape that is recycled is helping stop a big hole in the ground being built somewhere else. It really is as simple as that.
Yeah. Well, you've touched on this quite a lot about how green is green tech, and obviously the future in terms of the low carbon economy seems to be electric, and that means lots of solar panels and lots of batteries. And we always find that sort of bad actors or those sort of pushing for what we call predatory delay is sort of just trying to slow the transition down for whatever reason they have, tend to suddenly become environmentalists about this. So we get pictures of old lithium mines from the 90s and saying, look how terrible this is, or claims that solar panels will soon be stacked up in fields once they've reached the end of their lives. So do you have a feel for what the feasibility of turning those products in particular into more of a circular economy so that we can recover the resources and reuse them?
Yeah, it's interesting because it was at the fridge mountains, wasn't it? The sort of 30 years ago, which actually triggered the waste electrical regulations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what's interesting about them is that they were conceived 30, 40 years ago to deal with fridges at the time because there were concerns around not greenhouse gas emissions, more ozone depleting gases from fridges. And also old cathode ray tube televisions, which had lots of nasties in the back of them if they weren't dealt with correctly. And vapes is a good example of how they were, that lag, the negative impact of a lag, because they weren't designed to deal with fast moving consumer goods that were tech, because nobody envisaged that. Why would no one envisaged that you would have something sold in its millions like that. And I think the thing is, this is why the positivity is important, is that you have producer responsibility systems in place that need to be tweaked. That already includes solar panels, for example. Yes, there is a big challenge. The solar challenge is special to a degree in that it's been through so many, ups and downs, peaks and troughs, and the people who put the products on the market 15 years ago often don't exist. And what do we know about what's inside of them and all that sort of stuff? So you can be a bit doom and gloom about it. But actually, that's not that different to any other technology. And the way that the waste electrical regulations work is that you know Samsung are paying for the recycling of Sony televisions because that market dynamic just shifted. It's LG who are paying for Ferguson and Panasonic televisions. So the system is strong enough to cope with that. You just need the commitment to do it, but it's there. So I think, yeah, that naysayer stuff is as you said, you need to watch it in that you need to be truthful about the challenge. You can't say, hey, it's great, everything's great, it's perfect, it's easy to recycle 15-year-old solar panels, which when we don't know what's in them. But it's very possible to do that. It's very possible to recover that material. You just need a commitment of all the relevant stakeholders, including government. And we can do that. We're doing it already. Hundreds of thousands of tons of electricals are being recycled in the UK, supporting UK economy, supporting UK jobs. Last year, so 16 million more small electricals were recycled last year than they were the previous year. 12 million more if you go back another year. So it's all getting better. And that's the story that we also need to tell. What we need to work on next is and which is what we want to do is our first 5-6 years was about making recycling the worst thing that people do. So trying to, preventing that binning and lifting everything up to being recycling. Now we can start talking. We already do talk about it, but we'll be talking a little bit more now about repair, about reuse, and the value that you can have. But you have to earn. And I don't apologize for this. We had to lift everything up. When we started, 150,000 tons of electricals were being binned. Last time we looked, it was 100,000 tons. So we've managed to. It's not perfect. We still need to work on it, but that's impact and that's change. And it's about being positive for change. And yeah, the naysayers will come, but bat them off with facts and stories and positives and all those things.
Yeah. And then there's the design of the products themselves. I've seen and this idea of design for disassembly. And I was just wondering if you had any views on what improvements could be made. I've seen the videos of the fantastic robots that Apple have to dismantle phones and things, but it still looks very in a very slow process, relatively speaking, when you've got robots undoing individual screws. It must be 20 years ago I saw presentations on how smart materials might make automatic disassembly a thing, and the academics who were doing that were working with phone companies at the time. But I just wonder whether there is something that can be done, further upstream to try and make these materials easier to recover.
Most definitely. I mean, yeah, without naming the company with the robot, that's very good PR. That's not scalable. It's not happening at any scale. I was at a recycler a couple of weeks ago, where the sort of reality of how you disassemble vapes for recycling was put in
Mm.
front of me. It was basically, it's almost Dickensian. You had basically a line of people on benches with goggles, gloves, and pliers pulling it apart. So that's probably where the truth is. A friend of mine, I don't know if you know him, a designer, Jude Pullen, has a great line about less glues, more screws in terms of making stuff that you can actually fix and repair. Yeah, I think it's a big challenge. Most products that we get in the UK are designed and conceived a long way away, and they're designed and conceived for a global market often. And I think sustainability, design for durability, longevity is more in the mix than it was 10, 15 years ago. But from my own experience when I was working at Samsung, the largest uh, tech company in the world, if you think about all the products that they make, I was looking after sustainability for the UK and Ireland. My ability to influence product design in Korea it was less than nano. It was nothing. So it's a cliche, but it's a journey. I think sustainability is a bigger issue globally than it's ever been, despite the fact that those of us who are in it are frustrated that it's not front and center. But it's more than it was when I first came into to this sector. And there's also there is a truth. You have to be pragmatic. There's a truth around how products are designed and built to function. Around. So I've heard smartphone companies talk about well, the battery is embedded because we've got dust resistance, water resistance, all these other things too. So there's always a play. So I just think you just have to be realistic about it and push for more, but also, you know, you and I, without being disrespectful, you and I are old enough to know when there wasn't mobile phones.
Yeah.
Think how fast the world does change and can change. And I think keep pushing away and hope that maybe there is a real big, flip.
Yeah.
The tip, the Gladwell sort of cliche of a tipping point. But you're seeing more stuff. But also I think we have to be truthful that we as people are part of this. What do we demand? What do we buy? I find it fascinating how the and it's a story that's told, but the smartphone change, the you know it doesn't feel that long ago that it was you had to get a new iPhone, you have to get a new phone every year. Prior to that, the new Samsung, the new Nokia. Most people, and maybe it's my age, but most people I know are not bothered anymore about the new launch. They're happy to buy a second-hand smartphone, and what feels like is here to stay sometimes often isn't here to stay. It's just got its moment, and that gives some hope. I know it's only one particular type of product, but it gives some hope that actually, we get it collectively we get it and we start to make some different decisions, but we should never underestimate our power in what we buy. That's the thing as well. What we buy really does have impact.
Yeah. Just your anecdote there about Samsung. Just I find that all the time is that organizations have a disconnect between responsibility for sustainability and actual ability to do something about it. And I'm always lecturing companies to, if you're going to engage anybody in your organization, it's the product or service designers will have most influence over sustainability, not your sustainability manager.
Yeah, because it's a boring, but it's about like budgets and balance sheets and profit lines. Is that if you think about big organizations, they have I don't know they have the UK office, they have the France office, they have the Spain, and it sits as an entirely separate entity. So the costs of dealing with producer responsibility in that scenario sits entirely within that country's business. Often it might even be the finance team as well. So if it's in the finance team, they're doing their job is to keep the costs as low as possible. So it's a totally end of pipe after the fact, the ship has sailed type thing. And that's just you have to be honest about that and think how can you change that? And that's really for a multinational company, that's really complicated about how do you combine everybody's profit lines and KPIs and all that sort of stuff. But that is something that they're going to have to figure out eventually because it was. Don't get me wrong, I love my time at Samsung. I learned an awful lot there
Mhm.
about so many things, but it was that. But I also learned to be pragmatic and realistic about it. It was like you can't. This is not the. Don't you can't have this fight at this moment because you don't have influence, but you can fight this thing and make this thing work. So.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we've covered an awful lot of ground, but just as a final question, if you were going to, and you probably are already, but if you were going to pitch one policy at decision makers in government or elsewhere, what would be your priority?
See, that's a tricky one for me because I'm publicly out there saying I don't do policy. Um, I I just a big thing for me at the moment is around waste electricals is we need enough flex in whatever comes next. We need enough flex to be able to create a new, and it sounds very technical, but a new product category if something comes along. What I've seen with vapes is I've been talking about vapes for 4 years, and I knew exactly that it needed to be isolated, it needed to be separated so that we could get the data, we could make those responsible, set targets for them, all that sort of stuff. And in policy circles, that flexibility is often called gold plating. No government wants to give a following government flex to sort of change the rules. But I think, there you go. I don't do, and from an environmental perspective, so what? You just you got to play with the truth. So it's a bit of a Donald Rumsfeld. There are known knowns, there are known unknowns. I know that products are coming that are going to cause us a massive headache. I don't know what they are yet. I have an inclination of what some of them might be. E-textiles is an example of that. People are running around with fitness, with wires in their vests. How are we going to deal with those? There's no recycler who's geared up for that. So it's having that flex. So it's not necessarily a policy recommendation, but other than have policy that has enough flex to deal with back to where we were at the start, true life.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can live wishfully in policy circles for what you want,
yeah,
but actually, what's happening? That's more important than what you want.
yeah. So that ability to adapt quickly to change in socio-economic trends, I suppose.
Which is tough. It's Nostradamus territory that we're in, but again, although I say I'm reluctant to talk about it, I'm not really. But that the vape thing is visceral. It's 8 million a week. It's hundreds. Over a billion, at least over a billion toxic fire sticks have been binned or littered over the last 4 years. That's just not accept. It's not acceptable. And if there's anything we can do on a policy front that gives us some ability to respond to a possible, and this is like, I mean, it's just a possible, but it feels inevitable. With tech, it feels inevitable because at the moment, if in doubt, put an LED light in it, seems to be the mantra of anyone who's designing anything. Or put pistachio in it as well. Pistachio is not as damaging to the environment as a lithium-ion battery, I admit. But maybe there should be pistachio producer responsibility legislation, given how far and wide it is at the moment.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, I think we'll draw things to a close. So it just leaves me to thank you very much, Scott, for joining us today.
Thanks, Gareth.
And I will put a link to that fund in the show notes if anybody's interested. The deadline was 14th of August, 2025, I should say, in case you're listening to this next year.
Yeah, 14th of August. And if if you're in doubt about where you can recycle your electricals, search recycle your electricals, and Hypnocat will help you find your nearest drop-off point.
And you will never forget Hypnocat once you've seen Hypnocat. Thank you, Scott.
Cheers.